You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented The Thing. Watching it with me is John Smith from Who Trial. How are you, John? How are you?
I'm absolutely fantastic. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me talk about this film.
No, thank you for bringing your Betamax copy. I know we'll have to rewind it at the end. What is so special about... And let me clarify, this is 1982 John Carpenter's The Thing for you.
Yeah, there's two things about it, and I'm going to do a Wurzel Gummidge thing. I'm going to put two different heads on. With my grown-up head today, this is very close to being a perfect film. It doesn't put a foot wrong. The screenplay is absolutely spot on. The performances are brilliant, and the direction is out of this world, because so much of this film is 5 to 10 guys standing in a circle talking, and making that visually interesting is really difficult, and John Carpenter does it. And so just from a technical point of view, from a filmmaking point of view, this takes you on a roller coaster ride and you enjoy every second.
I mean, this movie for me was always kind of billed as a horror, and I think as we talked about off air, I had seen it for the first time years ago and thought, wow, that's really good, and kind of left it parked in my brain. And it was only at the weekend, well, a couple of days ago, when I watched it again on HD in a big telly, and I sat there for pretty much the entirety of the film going, wow. It's so much more than a horror film.
It is. I was watching it with my wife, and she actually said she'd sit down and watch it with me. She said, oh, that's a good one. And she sat with me and she said, aren't you supposed to be taking notes? I said, yeah. She said, well, you're not. You just sat there with a big smile on your face. And I'll tell you which bit it was when we get there. But my other head is 11-year-old me. 11-year-old me sitting in a neighbour's house, and I put in a VHS copy of this. VHS, not Betamax, sorry. And but it was a top loader. Okay. And I put it in and I watched this, and yeah, it's so much more than a horror film. But for an 11-year-old kid who's grown up on Hammer films, this is a horror film.
Oh, yes.
And I got as far as the dog, and you know, the dog in the kennel, and I had to turn it off, and I couldn't watch it again until I was 18. And when I was 18, I went out and I bought a VHS copy of it, because Betamax was unfortunately dead by then.
That's what we do.
I bought a VHS copy of it, and I went, I'm going to beat this film. And I watched it on a bright summer's afternoon with a friend and fell in love.
Oh, it's just so... Again, watching it, there's so many levels to it, and I mean, one of the reasons, and I know we've been talking about doing this for months, and shamefully only just getting around to doing it now, but I did get some feedback and say, oh, you need to do more horror films. And then after watching this again, and I'm sitting there going, but this could quite easily be a sci-fi film, or it could quite easily be sort of thinking a thriller film because of the tension between the characters. It's almost like something out of 12 Angry Men or something like that, where you've got these guys, and they are all guys. It's not, you know, this film will not pass any test. I don't think there's a female in it.
There is. Famously, there is the female chess computer.
Oh, of course, yes.
That's it.
Wasn't that voiced by John Carpenter's then wife, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I mean, she didn't talk to another female chess computer about something that wasn't a man. And you see, again, watching it, 38 years later, you can see the impact it's had on other films, the films it's inspired. I mean, even, you know, one of my favourite films, Predator, you know, huge parts of that are not, I won't insult Predator, but very much taken from this.
Definitely. I think the way in which this film to me feels like a horror film is the existential dread of it. And although it's 1981, it was filmed 82, it was put out, and it came out the same year as E.T., famously. And the audience very much went for the alien with a face like a friendly turd instead of Rob Bottin's ganja-infused nightmares.
Oh.
But it feels like a 70s movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That bleak sort of, there's no way out, there's no way you win here. And it's empty, and that even Morricone's synth score, this feels like the end of the 70s rather than the birth of the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, tonally, you can talk about such vintage things as Kurt Russell's hair.
Oh, yeah. It's magnificent. And this is Kurt Russell at his peak, isn't it? This is him channeling that full masculine Snake Plissken sort of thing that he'll keep riding for the rest of his career. He's just brilliant.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got this group of guys on an Antarctic research institute, and yes, there is a lot of drinking. There's the ping pong table and the arcade machine, but essentially these are guys living together, and in the best of times, if there wasn't an alien there, there would be issues. It would be like living in the Big Brother house, but without the idiots.
Yeah, and the screenplay is so good at bringing all those tensions out. I teach film studies in my proper life, and I can't show the kids this film because it's an 18. But what I can do is give them the screenplay, which I do. And the very first page of the screenplay is a little pen portrait of all the characters. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
And it sums them up in one line. And the line about Kurt Russell's character, Mac, is in 2 sentences, tells you everything you need to know about him. Hates the cold. The pay is good.
Oh, that's like me. And I work in fucking Surrey. Yeah. But this is it. I mean, you've got well-written characters. There aren't, I wouldn't even say cliches at all. I mean,
No.
It's so easy to think that Kurt Russell's the star. He's going to be like a Snake or any of his other famous characters, famous roles in those films. But yes, he's the lead. He's the dynamic one. But this isn't like a standard 80s movie where he doesn't come out with, he's not rent a quote. There's not that sort of scene that will be parodied throughout time. No. I mean, the first time we see him, he is playing chess against a computer, and when he loses, he basically empties his glass of scotch into the computer.
Cheating bitch.
Just to show you this guy doesn't take shit.
And the fact that he lives on his own. He's in the Antarctic, and even there, he still doesn't want to be around the other people, and he's in this shack.
I'll be in the porter cabin.
Yeah. But I mean, this is going to turn into such a sort of gushing fest from my point of view. But everything about it, the entire opening sequence where you get those big wide open shots, almost like a black and white film with the dog running across it, just to show the desolation and emptiness and the little heartbeat of Morricone's score. It just pulls you in beautifully. And we haven't even talked about the UFO.
No.
Because it actually opens with a UFO that's on screen for, 20 seconds? If that, and they've spent so much time on that model. If you actually see shots of the model, it's got working lights in it that run around the outside. Just the care and the love that has been lavished on this production at every level is phenomenal.
And one thing I did read when I was doing some reading about this is that it being a Universal film, it didn't open with the sort of famous Universal logo. And one of the things they did consider was having the UFO fly into
that would That would have been fantastic. And that fantastic title, the way the title burns through, which is such a simple thing. You can do it at home. I've done it.
What did you write?
The Thing, because I'm cheap. I have no ideas of my own. It's just a tank. It's an aquarium, a fish tank with milky water in, and you cut the word out of card, stick it to the back of the aquarium, the opposite side to your camera, and you stretch a bin liner over it and put a bright light behind it, and then you just set fire to the bin liner.
Okay.
That's it.
I might have to try that. It'll just say wanker or something.
Do it for the Patreon.
Next time the neighbours walk past, what?
Fuck you.
No, it was the fish tank. Now, I watched this, and like most films and like most podcasts, it's normally me sitting on my own if it's failed the wife test, because normally if I watch one of the films for these, my wife says yay or nay. She did watch Tomorrow Never Dies and said she will watch 9 to 5, but she didn't want to watch this. And so normally I end up watching these with a dog. And of course, of all the sort of creatures you want to watch the first, I don't know, half an hour of this film with, it's a jumpy 8-stone Labrador.
At any point did he just sort of like look at you?
He did a little bit weirdly, and then at one point that we'll come across later, he made this very odd sound as though he was communicating with the TV. It's
a lovely thing to open with the dog, because automatically, as the audience, you're on the dog's side.
Yeah.
You're going, why are these bastards trying to shoot the dog? I'm with the dog. And that pays off brilliantly later.
This dog is being chased by a pair of Norwegians in a helicopter. It's the stuff of nightmares. This is probably why it was banned in Finland. I did ask my wife about that being finished, but I think it was a bit before her time. She couldn't furnish me with why. But
maybe that's why she didn't watch it, because it's still in her head banned.
Yeah, I say it makes the Nordics look bad. So
those crazy Swedes.
It's trying to eat dog right now.
It's so good at creating these questions. Why are these guys trying to kill the dog? Why are they chasing the dog? What's going on? And it creates this entire backstory that's so good that it actually powers an entire prequel 30 years later. They get another film out of it.
Have you seen it?
No.
Yeah.
Have you?
No. Now, I am opposed to it because it's called The Thing. Obviously, they just changed the year in the brackets at the end. And I know it's a prequel, so it's not a remake, but...
It's unnecessary, because the whole thing with the Norwegian camp is in this film to give us the worst-case scenario, to say this is what's going to happen if you don't deal with the problem. And it's also buying into that gothic thing of where you find somebody's diary or letters or something where something horrible has happened and now this thing from the past is coming towards you. And so that's done. We don't need to see it. We know what happened. They all fucking died. We don't need to watch them die.
But we need to recast with attractive Hollywood people that weren't available probably weren't born in 1982.
We need big, hairy men. We're in the Arctic. That's what we need. Big, hairy men, including Gary, whose eyebrows appear to be 20 years older than the rest of his face.
Yeah, that was a freak, wasn't it? He should have been a 70s Chancellor or something like that.
Even Dennis Healy's eyebrows would have probably backed away from him, going, no.
They react to light. Yeah. Now, like you say, I mean, you're instinctively, when you see the opening of this film, instinctively on the side of this dog, you know, whether you're into animal cruelty or not. I mean, this looks bad. You're on the dog's side. I'm a dog man. And yet, fuck me, they should have killed it.
Absolutely. This is... If they'd just let them shoot the dog, things would have been so much better. But again, you've got to think, these two guys must have been the most they were actually, these two Norwegians at the beginning of this film are actually more successful than our characters in this film because they've survived and driven the thing away.
Yeah, I suppose they should have got. I mean, depends how humane. I don't know many Norwegians, but I guess if they'd been of a different persuasion, they might have just seen the dog enter the other camp and gone, "Oh, fucking good luck," turned around and gone home.
And then they drop fucking grenades. And again, it's worth pointing out the direction of this scene is so very quick and snappy. It immediately sets up all these characters of the people reacting, Childs and Mac and Gary getting his gun out and Clark immediately going for the dog. And it very quickly sketches in lots of little things about these characters that we're going to spend time with.
Because we spend, these are guys that we get to know over the next hour and 49 minutes or whatever it is. And yes, it follows some sort of template of a horror film where, yes, spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about bad things. These people die in order. They're not bikini-clad teenagers running through woods. But,
no.
Some of them are middle-aged men. I'll count myself in that. And they generally die in quite unpleasant ways. It follows a sequence, but this isn't just a sort of... They're not being hunted in the standard way. And the way that the tension and the paranoia grows between the... How many guys in there? 10, 11, something like that?
Yeah.
Just throughout, it's even to the end, there's still a complete lack of trust.
Yeah, it's all summed up for me in we're jumping about all over the spot, aren't we? Okay. But it's all summed up for me in that tape that that Mac makes, where he says, "We're all very tired. Nobody trusts anybody anymore." And even Blair, when he's locked up, she says, "I don't know who to trust."
Yeah.
And, trust in the Lord.
Now, that's one person we haven't talked about yet is Wilford Brimley, who is, I suppose he's cast as this kind of avuncular, very, I wouldn't say sweet old man or anything. Yeah. It's only when you find out that when this film was made, he was in his 40s.
Yeah, he's because we're of an age, aren't we?
Yeah,
he's our age, and it makes me feel a lot better about myself, frankly. That I don't look like Wilford Brimley.
He's had the world's toughest paper round
in Beirut,
and it's nice that he's returned after his previous outing on this podcast, where he was being harassed by Ewoks and basically being a grumpy old sod who turned out to be essentially a diabetic Han Solo. So, wow.
Maybe it was the Ewoks that aged him, because the vicious little things and cannibals.
Yeah, I mean, watching those films aged me, I'll be honest. I was 22 when I started. But in this, as Blair, he's sort of, certainly for the first half of the film, he's the Doctor. He doesn't get too alpha about anything. But what we do see at one point, and this just after they've gone through the papers of the Norwegians and what they found after their helicopter blows up, is they've gone back to the Norwegians' base and they've looked into, why have they flown to their base?
Yeah.
And again, partly horror movie trope, partly sci-fi, aliens from outer space, and some of the scenes in there were quite gruesome. I mean, you see skeletons burning like you do in Star Wars, and that's a U.
And the frozen blood is the one that always gets me. There's a guy, a Norwegian, who's obviously committed suicide rather than be taken over by the thing, and he's sliced his neck right open, and he's got these long frozen rivulets of blood going down to the snow, and it's incredible artistic approach towards the death and the gore. And sitting at the heart of it is Rob Bottin, this long-haired hippie, who's giggling to himself that he's been given all of the toys in the toy shop and just told, do this. And he said, I can do it all on screen. And obviously everybody else has gone, it needs to be stop motion. You've got to do this. He's going, no, I can do it live. And he's just mad genius. There's no other word for it.
I mean, I guess we see the first real creation at the Norwegians base that they bring back to theirs to examine. And it's part human, I guess is the best way you can describe it.
Two faces fused together, melted into each other, locked in a scream. And they all do this fantastic... They've got some dry ice on it, so there's what looks like steam or smoke coming off it. And as they open it, all of the actors do fantastic stench acting. Did
you smell that fart?
Yeah, smell the fart acting. And Wilford Brimley does a really good sort of like trying to choke back vomit as he's poking at the bit. And the sound design, the cracking and oozing and wet noises as they're separating all the bits. Oh, it's so good.
This is one that you need to watch in HD.
Definitely. And we had this conversation before, didn't we? Because I'd cracked out my old DVD, which I thoroughly recommend to everybody because the making of documentary is like 2 hours long. And the commentary is fantastic. I'm assuming they've carried over the Blu-ray. But then I got the HD copy. Oh, it's so good.
I mean, I got it off... I get most of my films these days off iTunes because otherwise my DVD shelves would be littered with the Moomins, Elmo and Video Nasties of the 80s.
I spit on your Moomin.
And I did look, actually. I was tempted to buy the Blu-ray because I think by the time we actually worked out a date and... as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the April 2020 lockdown and everything's up in the air. And I thought, fuck, I need to guarantee I can watch it. So I ended up renting it off iTunes. But I think Arrow did a Blu-ray release a couple of years ago. And it has what looks like every bell and whistle possible on the extras. And at the time of recording, anyway, it's only about £7. So might have to invest.
It's a film which has grown in appreciation over the years, and so people have put the time and effort into all these packages because so many people have gone into filmmaking for whom this was a seminal experience.
I guess this was a year, and like you said, this came out the same year as E.T., but it also came out the same year as Blade Runner, which has equally... I mean, yes, Blade Runner's gone through several transformations, much like The Thing. But they both came out to, I guess, poor reviews, and then in this case purely through home video and word of mouth and that kind of a bit of cliche itself, cult status.
Yeah.
And then Blade Runner eventually evolved in its own way into the classic that it turned out to be. But it's just strange that these things, or the thing in this case. I didn't mean that. It's turned out to be this classic that people are using as a template, as you say, teaching film studies, and using it as a perfect example. And I mean, the day we're doing this, I won't date too much other than it's April. There's a big thing going around Twitter because people are bored and got fuck all to do, and they're talking about what are your 5 favourite, what are the 5 perfect films.
Yeah.
And the amount of times I've seen The Thing on people's list of 5.
Yeah.
Which, yes, it's people on Twitter, you can't trust them. But
where do we meet again?
It's a Doctor Who car boot sale. Yeah. But these guys, that many people, you've got 5 choices of film to make, and when you compare some of the other ones on there, I mean, like Alien, for example. I mean, that's something that's similar to this.
That's an easy choice.
Yeah.
This I think one of the interesting things about this one is the impact that it has, because I know I said that it feels like a 70s film, but it has such a massive impact on 80s horror and horror special effects. You can't underestimate it, because think like American Werewolf in London, which you did the podcast on a little while ago. You don't get that transformation scene without the work that Rob Bottin's done here.
And I think with that as well, that there is an emphasis on something that you don't see. I don't think it's from the films now where the majority of it is done by computer.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is, and I think we talked about it on American Werewolf, where part of the horror is the pain that's obviously going through the transformation.
Yeah. And again, that's sold in this one with the same thing. It's the sound, it's the cracking, that organic. I mean, we're going to have to talk about the head bit when we get to the head bit. So I'm gonna save it for when we talk about the head bit. But again, when they're doing this autopsy, when Wilford Brimley Blair's doing the autopsy, and he's cracking the legs up like cracking crab shell. It feels visceral and it feels real, which helps crank up the tension and the paranoia. You can believe it and you can accept it because the whole thing feels real for you. Like the fact they built a refrigerated set so that their breath would steam. Things like that.
But like anything, it's quite most people, and especially in a film like this, having a layer of authenticity on it, whether it is from being creative about putting, making the breath show. It just, if it's one less thing to pick a hole in from the other side of the coin, then it just allows you to be there in that cabin.
Yeah, definitely. And you do feel in it, and part of that is the camera movement as well, because we haven't really talked about how it's actually shot, because he does a lot of very shallow focus. We're leaving a lot of darkness and blurred edges around the shots. So there's always that feeling that there's something there. There's something in the back of the shot you're not quite sure of. And then he pulls that gag later on where there's a blanket in the foreground of the shot out of focus and it moves.
And part of this as well is after the autopsy, and we suddenly see, why were these mad Norwegians chasing a dog? Now the kennel scene, and this is the sort of dog kennel that you don't see in comic strip of Peanuts. This is where that special effect is cranked up, and I don't know, partly it is that kind of old thing where you're probably more horrified because it's an animal.
Yeah, definitely. This was what did for me when I was an 11-year-old kid. Now I know that this was the one special effect that Rob Bottin didn't have time for, so it was farmed out to Stan Winston, of all people.
He didn't do too bad for himself.
No, he did all right, didn't he? He had a future ahead of him. And what got me thinking about it is, like you say, it's a dog, and I'm a dog person. But it was something that should not be. This simply should not be. This cannot happen. And it's the moment where the dog's face peels back like a banana.
Oh, don't.
And at that moment, that was me done as an 11-year-old kid. And I was just like, just inarticulate honking noises.
Oh, my dog's looking at me now going, what the fuck are you doing? And I think one of the achievements in this is, and it's pushing the envelope, and I guess in 1982 this must have been, watching this must have been a, blimey, just trying to picture it now. I mean, some of the effects, and I know that one of the things that Carpenter said in one of the interviews I read was that he didn't want it to look like this is a bloke in a suit. Sorry, he didn't say bloke. This is a man in a suit doing these effects. This is an alien being that it doesn't conform to what we understand. And this is how, when a dog essentially bursts open, it doesn't really go by the standard physics that we know. Some of the angles that these things come out and some of the things they do, just they don't make sense, but that's what makes them horrifying.
Absolutely right. And it is, because as we know, Carpenter's a Lovecraft fan. And this is that feeling, that idea of there is a universe out there that does not follow the rules that we understand. And this operates by totally different rules. And it feels alien in the very truest sense. And I think that was what did for me.
It's just, the scene is horrible.
Yeah. And then you catch the dogs when they come in, and you find the dogs that didn't get away in the process of being absorbed, and they're sort of like whining and they're in pain, and it's a very tough watch.
I know, even watching it now, it's shut up, dog. He's just yawned. You probably heard that.
I was just wondering if he's started vibrating and his head's starting to.
I think he's just getting ready to fart. I mean, I've just written in. I've got my notes here. I've just written gory as fuck.
Yeah.
And it's just. I mean, the whole concept of this alien. It doesn't hunt in the way that let's say it hunts the predator, or in the Alien movies, it kind of rebirths in that. And I guess that's a closer comparison. But even so, I mean, this. And how it does it, I mean, it assimilates into other people and takes over their look and their appearance, and essentially almost like a camouflage. And doing it with a human as well. It's
interesting. I've got a couple of questions for you about how good do you think the imitations are? Do you think that because there's two levels here, do you think the things know that they're things?
Oh, blimey. Well, like they're self-aware.
Yeah, because there's obviously, right, spoiler alert, Windows later on is revealed to be, not Windows, sorry, Palmer is revealed to be a thing. But he hasn't done anything up to that point to tip off the fact that he's a thing until they do the blood test. So until that moment, did he know?
But I did think about that, and I wondered, is it? And part of the blood test scene, which was, massively, the drama in that, is amazing. The tension,
it's just beautiful. It's so good.
And part of the blood test scene is that they test the blood to see if it reacts to. I mean, it's heat essentially, but I wonder if it's because it doesn't do anything unless it's provoked.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that because it has no need to react to something, perhaps it kind of becomes instinctively aggressive or defensive.
Yeah. But until that, because there's a really interesting little bit, right? So Blair goes tonto and smashes up the radio and all the other bits and pieces. And to be fair, he's got the right idea.
Yeah.
Hasn't he? He's right.
He's self-isolating.
Yeah. And then they lock him up in the storeroom. And just before he goes, he says something, and I don't know if you picked up on this, because you've only seen it twice. He says, "Don't trust Clark. It could be anybody. You hear we." He doesn't say you hear me. He says you hear we.
Okay.
Like he's part of something bigger. And as we know later on, Clark is human. But the reason I'm mentioning that is that line's not in the screenplay.
Oh, really?
That line is not there. Neither you hear me or you hear we is not in the screenplay. So again, is this... And the paranoia level gets huge and cranked up by finding, Macready's clothes. Has that been left there as a red herring by a thing?
Because we're kind of now into the realms of the intelligence.
Yeah.
Of this being.
Is it intelligent? Did they build that UFO?
Or did it assimilate something?
Someone, yeah.
Because I looked at the part where it said about the projection, and it said if the intruder organism reaches civilized areas, and again, this is very topical,
Yeah.
the entire world population be infected 27,000 hours from first contact.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, and again, this isn't borne out because it appears, anyway, at the end of the film that all is well. But what is the aim of this thing? Is it to survive or is it to take over?
Yeah. Or is it just to get away?
Yeah.
Because Blair, as Thing, is building a spaceship under the storeroom. So is he just wanting to get away again? It's really interesting. But again, I think possibly the most interesting thing is the thing itself is not the point and it's not the interest. What's interesting is the effect it has on these men under pressure.
It's just that it feels almost frivolous to say that the alien is the MacGuffin.
Yeah.
Because it's engineering, this is the element, the sci-fi element that breeds everything else. But when you get to it, and one other thing I thought about was it takes over the image of these humans or whatever creature it is. Does it also pick up their memories and emotions? And at what point, it's what that thing from Men in Black.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true though, because if I'll go back to Palmer, because if the thing is Palmer, then he's walking and talking and reacting exactly like Palmer after he's been assimilated. So yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. So what makes you you? If you're still you and you still think you're you, even though you're now a thing, are you still you? There's not many films that are sort of like schlock horror, gory, with heads coming off and legs and stuff like that, which you can actually start digging into and asking these questions.
We have essentially turned this podcast into a philosophy theory. Are we us?
So, yeah, are we us or are we things?
I'm going to have to check later. I might have to cut my finger open. And just wait till the next time I cook.
I'm trying to think where we... Oh, right. This is an interesting one. My wife has no patience at all with bad special effects.
Right.
She can't stand old films because she spends her whole time going, well, that's on strings, that's rubbish, all the rest of it. And she pointed out it's amazing how well this has stood up at the moment where we see the matte painting of the crashed UFO.
Yeah.
And it just goes to prove that matte paintings do not go out of fashion.
No, I mean, I talked about this on Raiders episode, I think it was, and it did seem when there are certain Twitter accounts that share a lot of back in the old, not those cunty nostalgia ones, but I mean the ones that show here's James Cameron doing a matte painting and here's one from the set of Star Wars or something like that.
Yeah.
But this, for example, I mean the detail that goes into it. And I mean, I can't draw for shit. I've not got no artistic credibility, and yet these things that are painted to recreate, it stops them having to take over an entire warehouse or do all this on computer. And just that one idea on a display, painted by hand, just brings everything into the scale.
And it's phenomenal as well. It's so well done. I had no idea how much of Star Wars was painted. I thought it was models.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Death Star stuff and I think I watched a documentary about the making of one of the I think it's the first Superman film, and they showed a lot of the Fortress of Solitude and how obviously the interactive parts were real around, I think it's Pinewood, but what made it the scale it was the matte paintings, and even some of them were just around the edges of the screen that maybe take up 10-15% of what you see, and yet they give it so much more.
I find it fascinating that this film, which is like the anti-Jaws, the anti-Alien, we're going to throw it all on the screen, but at the same time of throwing it all on the screen with these brand new special effects that Rob Bottin is inventing on the fly, is still at the same time using those very traditional methods like matte paintings. And it's that collision of the old and the new that makes the 80s so fascinating for films.
Yeah, and I think just looking at it now, and yes, it was, I think at the time was it Carpenter's biggest budget film.
Yeah.
And I guess the return on it initially was quite poor. And I guess if you're the film company, you're looking at it going, we spent all this money, and he chucked all this money at the screen and the effects and everything. And yet now, like you say, I mean, a bad special effect can ruin a scene, it can ruin a film.
Yeah.
And yet looking at this, and yes, we do have the benefit of hindsight in that it was a new method, a lot of it was creative. It wasn't something that had been done before, and that gives it a lot of credit. But it's better than most things you see now, because some of it looks like it got knocked up on an iPhone.
Yeah, it's good old fashioned filmmaking, allied to that guerrilla sensibility of finding a way to shock people that Carpenter learned when he was doing Halloween. There's the jump scare, where Fuchs is in the. He's in the lab and the lights go out and he lights the candle.
Yeah.
And he walks up to the door and somebody walks past the door and you get a sting in the music. And I'm a 45-year-old bloke sitting with my wife in the sofa in lockdown. I've seen the film, Christ knows how many times. It still made me fucking jump.
Now, in this part, we've had Bennings has been assimilated by the creepy. This is a proper horror bit where the blood starts trickling out.
Yeah, from the blanket in the foreground. And he stumbles out into the snow, doesn't he?
And this is something that they've kind of fed into us, where it says it likes to feed on those who are isolated or on their own, as though it's kind of, well, everyone stick together. Oh, but I've just got to go to the storeroom.
Yeah. And then there's that lovely shot. I mean, this film just effortlessly goes from perfect screen composition to perfect screen composition. That shot where they burn him and he's on the ground and they're stood round in a semicircle, and it's got that slight crane shot looking down at it. That's just a beautiful, beautiful shot.
Watching a load of men standing around watching another guy on fire, it's like something out of Eton.
It is. It's like Merchant Ivory.
It's like soggy biscuit for psychopaths. Yeah.
But if you want to talk about that, there is the bit where the dog thing spunks all over the other dogs.
Oh yeah.
So there's certainly those kind of fluids at play here.
There's something for everyone in this film.
Isn't there the bit where they put on a porn movie earlier on, don't they?
Yeah.
Windows, and maybe that's your test to see if you're a thing or not. If you still, what kind of porn would the thing watch? Thing porn.
I don't know. Something like there must be an alien fetish thing on Pornhub, probably.
To be fair, there's quite a lot of Japanese anime that would probably get the thing's motor running.
True. Or maybe just watch that bit in Total Recall with a woman with.
Yeah.
That one. Now, Blair has gone missing from this scene, and he's seen running away from the helicopter where he's been hiding. And we find out that he's been pilfering from the helicopter.
Yeah.
Like a magpie. Then we go to him smashing up basically everything in all the radio equipment, everything in there. And like you say earlier, to the layman, this seems like a perfect way of isolating the thing from everything else. It can't get out, it can't take anything over.
Yeah. Doesn't want to be a dog, it wants to be us.
Yeah. And borrowing, from other films. Again, I'm not going to keep going about Alien or Aliens or Alien 3, but there is that thing where it's stopping it from getting out. Stopping it from harming.
Don't break quarantine. Stay at home. Save lives.
Wash your hands.
Yeah. And but it's true though. It's that sense of we have to keep it here. We have to keep it contained. And at the end of the film, that's where we're going to end up. But these guys are still clinging to the hope that there's some way of them defeating it.
I can say that maybe this is part of the human study of it, where this is something that can be defeated and not just out-scienced or out-fought. This is something we've got to beat.
Yeah, this is a disease. It's not an animal. I think that's the key thing. They think it's a battle they can win. This is something you have to either avoid or you're going to die. That's it. It's not as binary as being able to fight it off.
I'm borrowing from another 80s movie. This would be like in Die Hard when Hans Gruber says, perhaps you've grown up watching too many cowboy movies.
Yeah.
These are guys, and they're doctors and scientists, and Kurt Russell. These are people who should know better, but because of what it's caused, it's if it bleeds, you can kill it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's true. And then we're heading up to the CPR bit.
Oh no!
Which, oh my God, I can't. There's so many moving parts in this scene that's so good. First off, we have the misdirect of, is Kurt Russell a thing? So he's been cut loose outside because they found the clothing.
They found his trousers.
Yeah. He's out of his skivvies. And I mean, the weird thing is there's like 3 different versions of that. Either Mac's a thing, or it's a red herring by Carpenter, or it's a red herring by the thing itself to make the other characters think. So, but anyway, there's that. He gets in, and then he holds everybody at ransom, doesn't he, with the dynamite.
Dynamite and a flare, or the flamethrower.
Yeah, and the flare that lasts forever. It's brilliant. Where did they get those flares from? Ian Malcolm could have used one of those in Jurassic Park.
You see them getting smuggled into German football grounds.
And I think the clever bit here is that the guy's had the heart attack, and he's getting CPR over here. But we, as the audience, are not looking at that. We're looking at the bit with Mac and Childs and Clark with the knife over in the other side of the room. And that's where our focus is.
And this is the whole, it's almost like a Mexican standoff sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things we talked about, and I think you sent me a link to it on Twitter previously.
The split diopter, yeah.
Yeah, where this is something, and it comes back to it again later, but Carpenter uses these diopters that show he works with focus.
Yeah.
And that, what you'd expect to be, he's in the foreground, he's in the background, or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, this is almost playing with us because we are focusing on the confrontation.
Yeah.
And not the imminent doom.
Yeah, that's right. And so he's gone from using lots of very shallow focus, where lots of stuff's out of focus, to this one scene now where we can see Clark with the knife in the foreground, we can see Kurt Russell in the back with the flamethrower, and then all this is happening, and that's building to a fever pitch over there. And then the doc is desperately trying to save, and he puts the defibrillators on the chest, and then fucking hell.
It's kind of like Little Shop of Horrors on acid.
It's so, who actually sat down and went, and then what I want to have happen is I want his chest to turn into an entire fucking mouth, and I want his arms to go in, and I want him to get his arms bitten off. But then for Carpenter to go, I like that, get me a double amputee.
Clear.
Imagine if this was the mind of a 9-year-old boy drawing this in an exercise book while bored in a history lesson. They'd be carted off.
Locked up, never see the light of day. And yet there's Rob Bottin sitting under a table, cackling to himself as this thing. And what I love about it is it's almost operatic, because just when you think it can't get any bigger or madder or weirder, his head starts to stretch off,
Oof.
still screaming. It drops off the end of the table, sprouts spider legs, and then eyes on stalks, which always makes me laugh. Because that's the bit where you know they're just enjoying themselves. And it starts to skitter off in the background of the shot of the characters looking horrified. And then the line. I love, again, Palmer's line, which is a classic. It really is. It's a beautiful... the whole scene is gorgeous, but this line is just the cherry on top, isn't it? Where he looks at the head scurrying off and just goes, "You gotta be fucking kidding me." Because he can't believe it either.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
The entire sequence from beginning to end is faultless, and it's perfect.
And what you have, again, not just with the acting, because, there's so many times in a film where you see, let's put them in inverted commas, the hero just takes everything in their stride.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you've got to be fucking kidding me. It's catchphrase stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just that kind of, oh, come on.
And it's genuine. That is genuinely what you would be thinking at this point. Just like, I refuse to believe this is happening.
And part of it, and again, comparing it to another film that took these things on, and if you compare it to the special effects in Terminator 2, where the T-1000 is having been shot and exploded, is all melting and all this stuff, and that's what they managed to achieve with admittedly state-of-the-art computers in the early 90s, but it's managed to make very similar look 10 years previous.
And it's all things like melted plastic. I know at one point Rob Bottin gets hospitalised because of the fumes that he's breathing in with these weird devil's brews he's coming up with. But it looks so good, and you believe it because it's physical and it's got weight to it, and it's there on set.
And just the way the head turns into the spider.
And it's the eye stalks as well. Just when they come up and they just look around.
It looks like the nuclear fish from The Simpsons.
Blinky. It's just absolutely glorious. It's like Hieronymus Bosch paintings come to life. And then just when you think it can't get any better, you're thinking like, this is the peak of this film. You then go straight into the blood test sequence.
And with this sequence, we've already had them a small scene where they were going to do a blood test with the blood bags that they keep, and this is part of the paranoia about who emptied the blood bags.
Yeah.
And the whole issue around who opened it, and I don't remember doing that. I definitely didn't do that. And this is where again, like, who is what. And this blood test scene, admittedly, we're talking about early 80s where perhaps blood hygiene is not what it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no clean needles and clean scalpels.
No. He cleans it on his jeans, doesn't he?
That's fantastic.
Windows just sort of like wipes it on his jeans before he cut you.
That'd be fine.
It'll be all right.
But I think the concept of it is that they pour the blood into a petri dish and test it with basically a hot piece of cable, because with the theory that obviously turns out to be correct, that infected blood will react as though it's under attack and will either defend itself or escape. But again, it's easy to say it's not who you think. No,
and it's the way it's done, the sound of the flamethrower, the gas heating the wire, the high pitched squeak like fingernails on a blackboard as he rubs it into it, and the repetition and the rhythm of those little bits builds up the tension. And again, it does the misdirect, because he's in the middle of a conversation with Childs, and we're going to do it, and then it does it as a jump scare, catching you off guard because it's got your attention fixed over there instead of over here.
Because you think about it being, I suppose instinctively you think of one thing, this is
Yeah.
blood in a dish that's being tested, but you don't think that the blood in the dish is also still connected to the main organism. So when the blood reacts to it's Parma, isn't it?
Yeah, and the way it reacts is just glorious. And again, it's another little jump scare that gets you because you're not expecting it.
Yeah, you see blood sort of violently throw itself out of a dish, and all of a sudden the host body reacts too.
Starts twitching, and then, and again, it's another one of those ones where it's like, who actually came up with this idea that his head would split in half and turn into an enormous mouth, then pick up another guy by his head and start whirling him around the room? Who actually thinks like that?
I mean, 40 years later, I'm trying to admittedly scribble down some notes, and I just put eats Windows head.
It's and then so you've had the CPR scene and the head, and then you've had the blood test scene, and then you're actually wrung out. You've been put through the ringer, and then he finishes it with a gorgeous little comedy sequence, where it's that beautiful bit where he does one, and then you cut to the guy who's just been proved not to be a thing, standing with him looking down at the other two. Then they do the next one, and it cuts to the three of them there looking down at the last one. And the pacing of it is so good. And then I'm assuming you want to talk about Gary's line, because that's brilliant.
No, you go ahead with that one.
And it's the Al Pacino school of acting, where you start a line speaking and finish shouting. And it's...
I know you gentlemen have been through a lot. And when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch!
Imagine being that good with words that you can say something like... I mean, even in the IMDb quote section of this, it's got everything written in normal case until it gets to tied to this fucking couch.
And it's beautifully delivered. And it's the sense of outrage. So I'm like, okay, now, fucking get me out of here. It's gorgeous. But then we're into the end game because they think they've won now.
Yeah.
They've just got Blair to deal with.
And they've kind of forgotten about him, haven't they? Because he's in the tool shed, which I guess is euphemism for Ted and Ralph. Sort of. Well, he's down the tool shed.
Yeah, or of course, Roald Dahl's shed that he went into to write.
Yeah, writing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm writing in here. I'm definitely writing.
One cut.
I managed 3 pages.
Oh, that giant peach.
Chocolate factory. Oh. Yeah, and they go out and they go under the tool shed and they find the spaceship that's been built, and then of course that's when the generator goes, and that's when the full-on 70s-ness of it comes out, because there's actually the line, isn't there? We're not getting out here alive.
Yeah, you can see at this point this is where they are now, the Norwegians.
Yeah,
the Norwegians basically burnt their own base down trying to take this thing with him, and they have put more explosives than they've probably used in any Bond film into this base, and I'm sure they'll explain it to the bean counters at the science boffins.
I think that the key thing for me is that you get a lot of films where everybody dies. I mean, spoilers abound here, but you've got the Parallax View, you've got 3 Days of the Condor, you've got all these films in the 70s, The Wild Bunch, Bonnie and Clyde, where the characters die, but it's always done as a twist ending. You're not expecting it. But here, it's actually at the end of Act 2, more or less, said to you, this is not going to have a happy ending. Death is inevitable.
We're in that position where, like you say, the blood test is almost... It's going to be who kills who. Where they are testing who's a thing and who's not.
Yeah.
But because there's no escape, there's minimal rations or means of surviving beyond then. It's just a case of almost exploring. It's like answering the end of a game of Cluedo.
Yeah.
It was the thing with the head eating another head.
It was the thing with the ability to push his hand inside somebody else's face.
Oh, God.
Which is coming up in a second, isn't it?
But I thought, that was fantastic. But then part of me was just thinking, do you remember the scene in Top Secret? Where
with the mask, yeah.
Oh, God. He's stretching his face open and it just stays like that.
From a production design point of view, how good is this bit under the generator room with those flickering lights? That sort of hellish, inferno-like look down there, with Blair walking across with Gary's corpse dragging behind. Oh, it's beautiful.
And then we're sort of met with, as they're plugging everything, we see the scale of the thing now, the size of it. This isn't a dog or a spider with a head on it.
No.
This is something that can lift the ground up. And then just, was that a plunger? I'll have that.
And all those bits of the different things, like the dog bit that comes out, and the bit of Blair's head and a bit of Norris, and all of those things that have been absorbed into it. And then Kurt Russell gets his one big heroic Kurt Russell line, doesn't he, where he throws the dynamite in.
Fuck you too!
Ultimate Kurt.
You've said nothing but fuck you and all.
It's a very British response, actually. I think Mac might be British.
You
fuck you
scoundrel.
too. Twat.
I shall write to your social media company. Aggressively tweet them. I will never shop here again.
I will boycott them until the next time I need something and they've got it in stock.
Oh, they've got a sale on. Disgruntled of Antarctica.
I will never shop with Thing Incorporated again.
You ate my spider's head.
I ordered a hairy scientist and you sent me a head-eating spider thing.
Is that something from Viz? Head-eating spider.
The bottom inspecting things. The tendrils.
And this thing, the thing, I mean, it makes this almighty mess, and with all the explosives that they've laid, that's enough to basically sink the whole of Antarctica.
Yeah.
And all you've got at the end is Mac and Childs.
Yeah.
Mac's there with his famous scotch. And I'm sure at one point I read one of the reviews just saying this film was sponsored by J&B.
It's certainly keeping him going.
Yeah, must have a crate of it somewhere.
And that lovely little end, if either of us have a surprise for each other, I don't think we're any state to do anything about it.
I suppose it's two guys just thinking, oh, fuck it, let's just have a drink.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Just sit here and wait a while and see what happens.
Give each other some serious paranoid side-eye.
And all I've got written down here is, fuck your spinning top, Nolan. That's how you end a goddamn movie. That's a fucking ending.
God. So I remember that film, Inception, when I went to see it at the cinema, and they had that spinning top. And I don't have enough time in the world to try and explain Inception to anyone who hasn't seen it. But the film ends on the spinning top, and I remember the cinema, I think it was in Wandsworth or something, and the whole of the audience just went, oh, for fuck's sake. And you can imagine 40 years ago people doing this at the end, just going, that's it, come on.
I mean, I think knowing Carpenter and knowing what he does with Prince of Darkness and this and In the Mouth of Madness, I think it's pretty clear that his intention is at least one of them is a thing. Yeah. And the world is fucking doomed. Because those are the kind of movies he's making.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, again, I'm not going to make myself sound like a medical expert here, but Childs vanished.
Yeah.
he wasn't seen throughout most of that part of the movie, and of course Mac had various interactions within that part of the movie. Now, at what point did either of them, on their own, that were off screen or something, get infected? We don't know. Maybe they didn't wash their hands. Maybe they didn't wear a face mask. I don't know.
Yeah. Just been out shopping more than once a day.
Yeah.
Gone out to get Easter eggs.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is they've banned haircuts, and I'm sure McCready's gone for a trim somewhere. I mean, there's split ends.
There's product involved there. You don't get that kind of gravity-defying bouffon. But I find it interesting that in his old age, that's the look that Kurt Russell has sort of gravitated back to.
I suppose he's replaying his greatest hits.
And why wouldn't you, frankly? If you were Kurt Russell, why would you not grow face fungus like that?
What a handsome man.
He's magnificent, isn't he?
Yeah. I might need to watch Tango and Cash again.
Sweaty vest.
And, of course, you sit there thinking, you know what we need after this? Perhaps in, 28, 29 years' time, we need to go back, now that the film is starting to, it's reached a point in cultural history where a lot of people have grown up with this film, a lot of people have come to love it. Let's do a prequel. I mean, it sounds awfully similar to another film where they did a prequel a while after.
I'm sure
Jar Jar Binks in this one.
Sounds a bit Norwegian. That sounds like a Norwegian name, Jar Jar. Every time people, dog's face gonna split open. I suppose we should just be grateful that nobody felt like it needed a reboot.
Oh, don't speak too soon.
No, it's because it's not. It's an interesting one. Because have you ever seen the black and white one, The Thing from Another World?
Was that the 50s one? I haven't, no.
Because that's based on the same short story that this is, but it gets rid of the whole shape-shifting and paranoia thing. Because the short story is very much sort of like, Reds under the bed, communists. It's the invasion of the body snatchers kind of feel. Yeah. And it just makes it a giant vampire carrot.
Obviously.
That's genuinely true. He's a vegetable who drinks blood and looks like Frankenstein's monster.
He's supposed to represent the communists.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can't afford meat, What do you want? But it's interesting that this one goes back to it and hits the source material true. It keeps a very close eye on the source material, so there's nothing else really to go back and say. And that's my problem with the prequel. Like we said, it's superfluous. It's unnecessary. We don't need it. It's not like the True Grit remake that the Coen brothers did, which goes back and does something different with the original story.
I mean, that was what they did with Total Recall, wasn't it?
Yeah. The two films. One film is its own thing. The other film is much closer to the Philip K. Dick.
I know which one I preferred.
Well, yeah, it's Arnold, isn't it? And let's be honest, any film with Ronnie Cox in is going to win. Because Ronnie Cox is the patron saint of awesome 80s action films.
Absolutely. And of course, Total Recall was set in the 80s. I mean, the 2080s, but still.
Yeah, but it's still the 80s.
Yeah.
And in their future, I bet they still had Betamax.
Oh, yeah. And Sharon Stone in Lycra and all sorts.
Kurt Russell in a sweaty vest and Sharon Stone in Lycra, and that is a good night out.
There is your remake.
Digital de-aging. Make it happen, Marvel.
God. Now, I watched that last Marvel film last week because it was one of those, I need to watch it and get it done. And seeing some of the de-aging in that, and I think they made Michael Douglas, de-aged him to about 60 or something stupid. I mean, why can't they do that? At least for our generation.
What, just for us walking round?
Give us Kurt Russell and Sharon Stone.
Well, they did Kurt Russell, didn't they?
The Guardians.
So they've got the files.
Oh, wow.
It's a no-brainer. This isn't going to cost them anything.
I mean, can we be creative? Didn't they... I think Michelle Pfeiffer was in one of those films.
She
wasn't
was. Yes, they've got the files for her as well.
That'll be a good substitution.
Yeah, because that'll be Catwoman era Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
Oh no! Sorry, it'll be Fabulous Baker Boys. The red dress on top of the piano. There we go. Are you off to your shed to do some writing now?
Yes. In the tool shed. I'm just building a spaceship.
I'm feeling much better now. I'm not going to hurt anybody. Let me out.
It must be my diabetes. On that bombshell.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come on and gush for an hour about this magnificent film.
Thank you for reopening my eyes, and because I'll be honest, and again, like I mentioned before, this is something that was fed back saying, why don't you do more horror films?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh fuck, I said we'd do this one, and I kind of thought, I enjoyed it last time, I'll watch it again. My God, what a masterpiece! Yeah,
it's you can rent it for £3 from Amazon Prime, or you can buy it for $7.99. Or like you said, the DVD, the Blu-ray is £7. Just get it. If you've never seen it, just buy it.
I've just enjoyed it so much. Coming to it now with eyes, that have been tainted / enhanced by watching numerous Cannon movies and obligatory mention there, but it's I've seen some utter shit doing this podcast.
Yeah,
some films that have aged badly, some that have aged very well, and I think this one, and I talked about it with Joe Scaramanga on Twitter. He mentioned, and I think one of the things that came up with this film improves when you watch it.
Yeah, every time you watch it, you pick up a new texture, a new nuance, something else. And it's when we were kids, those stupid patterns, the Chaos Master, the Mandelbrot stuff,
the
fractals. And every time you look in, you see another layer and another layer. And that's what this film is. It's endlessly rewarding.
And I think it says a lot that I think as soon as the film finished, I went straight onto iTunes thinking, should I be a tight fucker and see, well, I've just rented it. Will you let me buy it and only pay the difference and not have to pay for it again? But no, I'm going to buy the Blu-ray and hopefully my money will go to a company that pay tax.
Yes, well, not from Amazon then.
No. I get my toilet roll and everything else. I think I've told them on several occasions I'm never going to shop there again. But it's the cheapest place to get my dishwasher cleaner, so what can you say? Anyway, John, thank you for bringing your Betamax copy of The Thing.
Thank you very much.
1982.
I'm going to put it away now and not watch it again until I'm 18.
Oh, good. We'll keep those dogs safe.
Yeah.
Now, your podcast is the Trial of a Time Lord podcast.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
It started out, the first 3 episodes were what it says on the tin. We were just putting Doctor Who on trial, one story at a time. Is this story good? Is it great? Or is it shite? And then it's sort of like a thing. It mutated and it became filth. And it became a discussion about all horrible things in Doctor Who that people don't notice, like the preponderance of bollock monsters and the fact that a lot of the characters appear to be perverts. And so now, although we're still putting them on trial, it's more that we're sort of like defiling your childhood one story at a time. So I find myself talking about this and apologising for it. more than trying to sell it. It's sort of, I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's a different guest every episode, much the same as this. And I never say what it is. The guest always says, I want to come on, I want to prosecute or defend this. And so I get forced to watch an awful lot of shit Doctor Who.
Blimey. And just to give some credence to what you said, I've got the pod feed up on my laptop of now the last episode you put out, episode 48, the opening word in the description, Spunkageddon.
It is Spunkageddon. It's a spunk fest, yes.
Yeah. Say no more. It does exactly what it says on the side of the Dalek, I guess.
Yes.
Showing my complete Doctor Who lack of knowledge, I assume there's a Dalek involved somewhere. So.
There is in that one, yes.
Okay.
It's the Daleks that are spunking everywhere.
Oh, of course. Well, they're only human. Oh, wait, no. They're things. Oh.
Yeah, interesting.
And speaking of spunking everywhere, the song that was number one when this film was released in the UK, it was 26th of August 1982. It was "Come On Eileen." Oh, you wonder where I was going with that one.
Oh, marvellous.
Wow, that worked out well.
Wow. Yeah.
It feels like we're at a really bad wedding.
What, where somebody's assimilating somebody else in the corner, there's a dog splitting over there, there's soggy biscuit round a burning man
and
over
I've
here.
somehow lowered the tone from that.
By putting "Come On Eileen" on.
After spunking Daleks. Jesus. Oh, blimey. Well, apologies, Eileen, in advance. John, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, Rich. I've had a ball.
Lovely. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This podcast was brought to you by executive producers Gary West, Fergus Higginson, Keith Foster, Jimmy Fletcher, Mark Drakes, Matt Cullington, Christian Dees, Andy Elliott, Chris Hopkins, Omar Zamban, Ian Majorel, Catherine Lowe, Mark Makin, Zoltan Vargo, Simon Smith, Matt Lee, Laurie Curran, Wayne McNally, Darren Hodgkins, Dan Wellington, Alex Hill and Adam Blake, Associate Producer Chris Oakley. Visit patreon.com/Betamax Video Club for more information about bonus episodes, early access, Betamax Video Club merchandise and more. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast on iTunes.